Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Namaskar students, welcome to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University's video AIDS lecture session. I, Dr. Nikita Kadani, Assistant Professor, Department of English, School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. Today's our topic of lecture is, we'll be talking about paper 3, that is History of English Literature, and unit 3, that is Age of Chaucer, Historical Background and Characteristics. So the components of our presentations are that we'll be talking about first objectives, then we'll be talking about introduction, then we'll be talking about the historical background. After that we'll be talking about the cultural and intellectual background. Then after we'll be talking about literary background, and after that we'll be summing up our unit and presentation as well, and that is followed by exercises and question answer sessions. So objective of our presentations of today's, that is, today we'll be learning to provide an overview of the age of in which Chaucer lived and wrote. After that we'll be talking about the background that helps to understand the social environment of the age of Chaucer, and then after we'll be try to learn the Chaucer's age, both the medieval and the modern, and examine the literary and intellectual tendencies. So talking about and starting to our topic of today, that is, like in this unit we'll be learning, and this will help you to inform with a different aspect of the age of Chaucer, which was the first significant period in the literary history of English literature. It was an age of change from decreasing feudalism to the emerging money and economy. This transition implies a shift from the medieval to the modern times, the emergence of the English nations from the Dark Ages to the Age of Enlightenment. Chaucer's age was the stormy period in terms of social, political and religious challenges. In fact, the age of Chaucer was not the stagnant. It was creeping its way steady and surely to the dawn of the Renaissance and the Reformations, which were yet a couple of centuries ahead. It was an age of restlessness, aimed a fragment of a new life that Chaucer lived and wrote. So talking about the historical background of the Chaucer's age, that the second half of the 14th century, that is 1350 to 1400, is referred to in the history of English literature as the Age of Chaucer. The age has been named after its representative poet Chaucer. It was a period of transition, and this transition implies a move from the medieval to the modern age. So after that it can be said that, like, the emergence of the English nations from the Dark Ages to the Age of Enlightenment. So in spite of the fact that a few components related with the modernity were coming into the prominence, yet essentially the age was medieval in outlook and unscientific, superstitious, chivalrous, religious minded and backward in many respects. So the 14th century, as J.M. Manley puts in the Cambridge History of English Literature, was a dark epoch in the history of England. So notwithstanding the silver lining of the modernity did succeed in intense here and there the thick haziness of ignorance and superstitions. In fact, the age of Chaucer was not stagnant, it was crawling steadily and surely to the dawn of the Renaissance and the Reformation, which were yet 2 or 3 centuries ahead. In short, the 14th century was the age when the seeds of modern age were being entrapped. So unrest and transitions were the common features of this age. and the geographical discoveries and the revolt against the medieval traditions lead towards the process of transitions which dated back to the second half of the 14th century. So, in the religious world, there was a serious outburst of unorthodoxy people. So, in short, the Age of Chaucer marks the beginning of a new era and a language and a literature. So, it initiates a noticeable departure from medievalism and the birth of an era of rational inquiry and critical understanding. So, the main events and the movements of the Age of Chaucer can be described in the political, economic, social, religious, and literary phrases. So, now talking about the political background of the Chaucer's age, the Age of Chaucer includes the greater part of the region of the Edward III and the long French wars associated with the name, the accession of the grandson Richard II, and the revolutions of 1399. So, talking about the upsurge of the nationalism, that it was an age in which there was a great upsurge of the nationalism and England was emerging as a strong nation. It was a period of 100 years wars. England won glorious victories and this gave it self-confidence and feigned the patriotism of people. So, England was also becoming a united nations. Wales and Ireland had been absorbed and the conquest of the Scotland completed the United Kingdom. So, at least for the time being, as Hudson remarks, that every fresh victory served to give further stimulus to national ambitions and pride. So, talking about the foreign trades of that time, the democratic tendencies spread like the wildfire in every walk of the life. As the trade and commerce expanded and now towns sprang up, the middle class became repository and the storehouse of the power, which speeded the decline of the old feudal system. So, now a dissatisfied and disconnected could become a free man by establishing a legal residence in one of the towns. King Edward III realized that it was an important duty of the government to foster foreign trade. The chief export at that time was raw wool, and Edward III made the city the sole center of the foreign sale and ordered that all wool should be shipped in English ships only. So, this helped to promote the growth of the more national industries, shipping, building, and seafaring. The other branch of the wool industry, the manufacture of the cloth, also began to make headway in England at this time. So, now talking about the culture and intellectual background of that period, that the social structure of the Age of Chaucer was divided into the three conventional states, that knight, the working man, and the clergyman. So, moving ahead, they're talking about the Age of Chivalry, that the chivalry was a system of ethical ideals developed among the knights of medieval Europe. Arising out of the feudalism of the period, it combined military virtues with those of Christianity as characterized by the artisan legend in England. The word chivalry comes from the French chevalier, meaning horseman or a knight. The chivalry was the code of conduct by which knights were supposedly guided. So, in addition to military prowess and valor and loyalty to the god and the knight's feudal lord, it called for courtesy toward enemies and generosity towards the sick and oppressed, widows, and other disadvantaged people. So, also incorporated in the ideal was courtly love, the romantic devotions for a sexually unattainable woman, usually another man's wife. So, adoration of the Virgin Mary played a vital role in this concept. The chivalric ideals influenced the founding of the religious military orders during the periods of the causes, among them the Templars and the Hospitallers. So, in the late Middle Ages, the rules formed the secular orders of the chivalry, such as the English Order of the Garter, that is in 1349, and the Burgundian Order of the Golden Fleece. So, by this time, however, chivalry had become largely a system of etiquette, and tournaments in which knights had originally risked their lives in jousting combat before the ladies and become simply elaborated, stylized and harmless entertainment. So, moreover, the expense of this and other trapping of the knighthood led many nobles who were eligible for the knighthood not to become knights at all. So, from chivalry or larger in literature than in the life comes the modern concept of the gentleman. So, talking about the Age of Chaucer that marked the highest development of the medieval civilizations in England. In fact, it was the midsummer of English chivalry. Although several changes in the life and thought of the people were taking place, and in some respect Chaucer's England was still characteristically medieval, and nowhere is the conservative feeling more strongly marked than in the persistence of the chivalry. So, the strange amalgam of love, war and religious that is chivalry, so far from the exhibiting and any signs of decay, reached perhaps its fullest development in this time. So, Compton Ricketts observed that the Chaucer England is still characteristically medieval, and nowhere is the conservative feeling more strongly marked than in the persistence of chivalry. So, now talking about the courtly love, that it is a code of romantic love that enjoyed a work among the aristocrats of Western Europe, and particularly from the 12th century to the 14th centuries. In its literary form, it's evolved a vassal-lord relationship under which the knight was his lady's obedient servant and prepared to overcome any obstacles or undergo any sufferings to win her favor. So, courtly love was always conducted outside wedlock and of necessity of secret between spouses. It was helped to do possible, although the unattainability of the beloved was sometimes central to the ideal, and its custom served equally well to the dignifying adultery. So, the convention is the first encountered in the late 11th century. People of French provincial cut start. People of provincial troubadours, but its origins are far from the clear cut. हाँ बस बस start. Ovid's art of love, widely drawn upon by medieval minstrel, is on one source. The Arabic Ring of the Dove by Ibn Hazm, which contains most of the ideas associated with the courtly love, is probably another. So, whatever the primary sources of the courtly love, across fertilizations of ideas and a practice certainly occurred. So, the rise of the cult of Mary, for instance, coined with it, and the great respect given to her by the church was reflected in the admirations of the noble woman prescribed by the secular code. So, the ideals of courtly love were most clearly defined in the English and the French royal courts presided over the Queen's Annalore of the Aquitaine and her daughter Maria de Champagne, under whose sponsorship some of the most famous books on the subjects were written. So the convention influenced poets throughout the Europe, and notably Dante and Petrarch in Italy and Chaucer in England, who in turn shaped the idea of courtly love in their own tastes and traditions. So with the rise of middle class, the ideals of courtly love were gradually merged into the institutions of marriage, and throughout this reversal of original values of courtly love, the concept has kept a stubborn but altered hold on the imaginations of the most Westerners. So talking about the Black Death, peasants' revolt and the labor's unrest. So in the age of Chaucer, most people were victims of poverty, squalor and pestilence. Even well-educated nobles eyed shop with suspensions, and learned physicians often forbade bathing as harmful for health. So this is why England was often visited by epidemics, especially plague, and the servants attacked of this dread epidemics came into 1348. So it was called the Black Death because black naughty boils appeared on the bodies of the hopeless victims. Though sanitation in the London was poor and living conditions were filthy, the river Thames brought more ships and infection to London, which spread to the rest of England. So the crowded, dirty living conditions of the England cities led to the rapid spread of the disease. It is estimated that about 1 million human beings were swept away by this epidemic. So that roughly makes 1/3 of the total population of the England that of at that time. The oldest, youngest and the poorest died first. Whole village and the towns in the England simply ceased to exist after the Black Death. So one immediate consequences of this pestilence was the acute shortage of the working hands, and the socio-economic system of England lay hopelessly and paralyzed. Laborers who happened to survive started demanding much higher wages, but neither their employers nor the king and nor the parliament was ready to meet these demands, and a number of regulations were passed asking workers to work at the old rates of the payment. This occasions a great deal of resentment, which culminated in the Peasants' Revolt in 1381 during the reign of Richard II. The peasants, growing under the weight of injustice and undue of official severity, were led to the London by the by the Kentish priest John Ball. He preached the dignity of labor and asked the nobles, when Adam dealt and Eve span, who was the gentleman? So the king, overawed by the mass of the peasantry armed with such weapons as hedge-shaped and pitchforks, promised reforms but later slave in the promise. The peasant revolt is, according to the Compton Ricket, a dame of foreshadowing the cut a dim of foreshadowing of those industrial troubles that lay in the distant future. R.K. roots thus sum up the significance of his offspring, like this revolt suppressed by the courage and good judgment of the boy King Richard II, though barren of any direct and immediate result, exerted a lasting influence on the temper of the lower class, fostering in them a spirit of independence which made them no longer a negligible quantity in the life of the nations. And this was another line of the progress towards the modernism. So talking about the church. So in the age of Chaucer, the church became a hotbed in profligacy, corruption and materialism. The overlord of the church, namely the Pope of Rome himself, had ambitions and aptitudes other than spiritual. W.H. Hudson maintains in this connections of spiritual zeal and energy very little was now left in the country. The greater Pulitzer helped of wealth and lived in a godless and worldly way. The rank and the far of the clergy were ignorant and carelessness. The mendicant fares were notorious and that grey and profligacy. Another contemporary has to say this about the priests, that our priests are now become blind, dark and beclouded. There is neither shaven crown on their heads, nor modesty in their words, and no temperance in their food, and nor even chastity in their deeds. So, in this was the condition of the ecclesiast, was one easily imagine that of the lately. And well does Chaucer say in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales that if gold rust, then shall iron do. So Chaucer himself was the indifferent to the any reform, but his character sketches of the ecclesiast and figures in the Canterbury Tales leave no uncertainty regarding the corruptions which had crept into the rank and filled. So the round boiled monk and the merry and the devil may cares friar and the unscrupulous ponderance and the fairy typical of the age. So this widespread and deep-rooted corruptions and already begun to provoke the attentions of some reformists, the most prominent of whom was John Wycliffe, who has been called the morning star of the Reformations. He started what is called the Lords of Movement, and his aim was to eradicate the evil and corruptions which had become a part and parcel of the church. He sent his poor priests to the part of the country for his spreading his message of the simplicity, purity and austerity. His self-appointed task was to take Christianity back to its origin, purity and spirituality. He exhorted people not to have anything to do with the corrupt minister of the Pope and to do faith only in the word of God as enshrined in the Bible, to make the teaching of the Bible accessible to the common masses, so that he held the people the some of the disciples translated to Bible and in Bible from Latin into the native tongue. He also wrote a number of tracts embodying his teaching. His translations of the Bible was in the words of W.H. Hudson that the first translations of the scriptures into the any modern vernacular tongue. The Chaucer was the sympathized to the Lollards movement is evident from the element of the idealizations which characterizes his portrait of the poor person in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. So the movement launched by the Wycliffe and his followers in the Age of Chaucer was an admonition of the Reformations which was to come in the 16th century to win England from the papal influence. So talking about the literary tendency of that era, that the Age of Chaucer was the first significant period in the literary history of English literature. The period marks a new era of new learning. Latin and French were the dominant languages in 14th century England, and however in the later half of the century English came to its own thanks to the sterling work done by the Chaucer and some other like Langland, Gower, Wycliffe, who wrote in English and wrote well. The English language itself was a fluid state of being and was divided into a number of dialects. The University of Cambridge and Oxford employed Latin as the medium of instructions. Latin was also the language of the fashionable who cultivated it as a social necessity. So the contribution of the Chaucer towards the standardizations and popularizations of the English language cannot be overestimated. However, apart from that, as regards his contributions to English poetry, he has well been characterized as the father of English poetry. No doubt there were other poets as well and the contemporaries with him, the Langland, Goers and a few more, but Chaucer is as head and shoulders amongst them as Shakespeare is among the Elizabethan dramatists. The English prose too was coming to the itself, and Medievallians, Travelgoes and Wycliffe's reformative pamphlets gave one a feeling that the English prose was its way to standardizations and popular acclamation. So in another way too, in the age of Chaucer stands between the medieval and the modern life. There was in the age some sort of minor renaissance. The dawn of the real renaissance in England was yet about 2 centuries ahead. Yet it is the age of Chaucer. There are signs of growing influence of the ancients on native literature. Chaucer's own poetry was influenced by the Italian writer Boccaccio and to a lesser extent Petrarch. The framework of the Boccaccio's Decameron and the Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales are almost similar. However, it is somewhat doubtful if Chaucer had read the Italian writer or not. So it was through the work of the two above named Italian writers that Humanism made its way to English intellectual culture. Compton Rickett rightly observed that the Chaucer's world is medieval, but beneath his medievalism, the leaven on the Renaissance is already at work. So, to summing up this unit, that what you have learned about the age of Chaucer, a transitional one. Although the focus has been historical and ultimately you have learned about the growth of towns, decline of chivalry, gender relations, people beliefs, the conditions of the poor and varying literary ideals. So in other words, we can say that you have acquired some ideas of the life and value of the people at that time. So now moving further to the exercise, that you have certain question in front of you. They are talking about the first question. The Chaucer age was the both medieval and modern. Explain. So you need to explain these questions. Literary and intellectual tendencies of the age of Chaucer. That you need to write about the literary tendencies in education tendencies, and after that you will short notes that is write about the church and the courtly law. So I hope that you have understood the topic. I hope you have understood the sessions. See you soon in next sessions. Thank you. Namaste.